So Jan's a team performance coach, and she's the president and founder of Gravitas Detroit. Can you, Jan, just frame what you actually do right now with your company?
Yeah, absolutely. Gravitas Detroit is a brand new company. It was formed late last year, and it is committed to creating the leaders for the future. We are focused on team performance coaching. We look at all aspects of diversity and inclusion and what it takes to really unleash the true leadership ability that's inside everyone. And that's what Gravitas Detroit is all about.
Wow, sounds great. And you're Jan Griffiths, and for anyone who's listening, I'm Peter Griffiths. Are we related? No, we're not. But prior to press and record, we were just having a chat. We both, I guess, have some Welsh heritage. I'm guessing Jan more than myself, because mine's more the namesake. As Jan, correct me if I'm wrong, you actually were born and you used to live in Wales, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I lived in Wales for the first 23 years of my life.
And for people listening, I mean, you've got an amazing story. I guess what life had laid out for you in terms of tradition, you grew up on a farm, is that right?
That's right. I grew up on a farm in a small village of Coiti, which is right outside of Bridgend in South Wales. And I was expected to grow up and marry the farmer next door and have a couple of kids and keep the farming line moving. And I didn't agree with that picture that life had set out for me. I wanted to do something different. I didn't know what it was. I had this drive and this passion to take on the world. But as a young woman in her early 20s, I didn't know what that looked like. Back in those days, in the early 80s, there was no exposure to different industries, opportunities to work in other industries. We didn't have the internet, really. We didn't have anything that we could research and understand what was out there. But I had this drive that said, I need to get out there. And I need to find a way to get out there. And I refuse to accept those limits that we often have in our minds that are set by our environment. So my environment told me, marry the farmer next door. But deep down inside, I said, no, I can't do that. So I had to push against that. And along comes the automotive industry. I had a call from what we would call a temp agency. And I remember I was riding my horse on a field, and my mother called me in to take the call, obviously before cell phones. So I took the call and they said, well, there's this company, it's called Borg Warner. I had never heard of it. And we want you to interview for a purchasing assistant. And I didn't really understand what automotive was, what purchasing was. I did not have any typing skills. I came out of college with a business studies degree, but I didn't know how to type, and they wanted somebody to type. So I ran up to the Welsh Valleys at the time. They were running all these courses to bring additional skill sets into the mining communities. And I did a crash course on typing, and I basically went into the plant and I said, yes, I can do this. I had no idea what I was doing. But what I did was I stayed behind every single day after work, and I did the typing at the end of the day so people couldn't see how slow I was actually on the typewriter to get the typing done.
Brilliant.
So that's how I started.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you ended up in Detroit where you are now, right?
Yes, that's right.
Wow,
The
that's quite a
company
big
that I worked,
difference between Wales, right?
that's right. I worked for Borg Warner Automotive, which was an American company, still is a great American auto supplier. And we were connected at the time. We made marine and industrial transmissions. And since I was the purchasing assistant, I was typing these bill of materials for these transmissions all day long. So I became a walking bill of materials. I knew everything about these part numbers. And then I became more inquisitive. I would ask about the blueprints, about the specifications. What is a casting? What is a forging? What is a machining print? And I was just relentless, asking questions all the time. And I quickly was promoted into the position of buyer, which I remember looking at in the day, typing a telex for the buyers and thinking how wonderful that would be to be a buyer someday. And within 6 to 8 months, I was a buyer. And then they promoted me again to materials manager within less than a year with very, very little experience. Again, I'm in my early 20s at this point. And the opportunity came up to move a transmission line from the plant in Wales back to Muncie, Indiana. And really nobody wanted to get involved with this project because it was originally they had sourced it into Europe and now they were moving it back to Muncie. And somebody thought, well, hey, there's this feisty young girl in Wales that seems to be, you know, that knows a lot about this product line. So why don't we peg her as the program manager to make this happen? I was so excited that I was selected for this job that I could barely even see straight. I didn't know anything about immigration. I didn't really understand where Muncie, Indiana was on the map. And I flew to Muncie, Indiana, and that was it. That was the launch of my career in America. And they liked my work in Muncie, Indiana. They thought I was a novelty because I didn't understand the language and they didn't understand my language. We speak English, but it's very, very different.
Yeah, I
I
think
didn't
Mira.
know that
Yeah, I
you
think
can
Mira can
relate, right?
actually identify with that because when we first met, obviously I've got a northern accent. You know, I grew up quite close to Wales, and I think for a while, Mira, correct me if I'm wrong, you couldn't really understand me, no?
Yeah, and but I've so resonate with your story, and I just go as you're talking. I go, yeah, I know that. I remember something similar. I remember when I first time went to Dubai, I did not speak English,
Oh,
and after a few years, and look at me now. I mean, it's still not perfect, but
close.
yeah, and we it's easy to forget, and I think lots of new people, lots of young people now, they think they should have it right now, but there is a journey behind it, and there is lots of what I can hear from your story. There is lots of joy in whatever you were doing in that moment. It's not, oh, I should be doing something else. You were
Right.
there, you were present, you were in the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've loved every step of my journey. I wouldn't change a thing. And when I came to Muncie, Indiana, I often tell, you know, young women, it's so important to travel and really assimilate into other cultures and figure out how to do that because it's good for the mind and it's good for the soul to figure out how to connect with other human beings in a different setting. And when I started in Muncie, I had no idea. I was so green. I remember landing in Chicago and looking at the guy next to me and saying, oh, I didn't know Chicago was on the coast. I didn't really understand that it was on a lake and there were these big lakes. I didn't know any of that. And I land literally in a cornfield in Muncie, Indiana. I caught a connecting flight from Chicago to Muncie. I had never driven an automatic. And then I was sitting in a car on the other side of the car. I didn't really understand what that was about. And then I had to drive to the hotel. So I figured out, you know, how to make all that happen. And then I remember sitting it was a Signature Inn in Muncie, Indiana. And I remember sitting in the morning and seeing all these people eating donuts. What is wrong with these people? Why are they eating donuts in the morning?
That's brilliant.
And looking at the TV and the news, you know, some sort of morning news program was on, and looking at the TV and thinking, now where am I on the map? And actually looking at people in the Signature Inn in the morning having breakfast going, excuse me, could you tell me where I am on this map? They must have thought, oh my gosh, how green is this woman?
It's amazing story. It's amazing story. Yeah.
Well, now I've traveled all over the world, and now I find that, you know, that story I find amusing. At the time, it was problematic, but I tell you what it has done. It has fueled me in so many different areas because it's fueled me to emphasize that message to other young women to get out there and get into other cultures. And as a mother of now a 17-year-old, I have made absolutely sure that my daughter can travel internationally by herself, and she's had that ability for several years now. I do not want her to feel as uncomfortable and as green as I was traveling in my early 20s. She could get in a plane and go anywhere in this world right now, and I wouldn't even worry about it.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear, because I guess what happens when we travel, right? We touched on it before. It does expand your mind. Let's be honest. I mean, you keep hearing that, but you learn about other cultures, and once you immerse yourself and you land somewhere that you don't know about. I mean, all three of us, right? We've all now lived in other people's countries as well, and it's really humbled me because, like it or not, you have to learn the ropes, right? So you have to find your way, and it actually develops those skills that you already have as humans, right? But it just
Yes.
helps you hone them. And I guess, touching on leadership, these are the kind of things that are really useful, right?
Yes, you're right. And one of the most important skills that we know as leaders we have, whether it's being a leader of our own life or as a leader of other people, is this idea of connection. We have this deep rooted need as human beings to connect with others. And when you're talking to somebody else who's from a different country, who looks different, who maybe speaks a different language, who grew up with a different set of values in a different environment, you really have to work hard to figure out how to make those connection points. It's not just automatic. You can't just assume that it's one way or another. So I think that's the real value when you work with other cultures. It really goes deep into figuring out how to connect with others.